And the other, they...
I would just turn it off, like mute it.
Yes, the headphone.
Ah, dank je. Kun je...
Perfect horen, ja.
Adeline, we can hear you. If you do not want us to, if you do not want us to hear you, you should mute your mic.
I know that. I was just checking something.
Okay,
Thank you.
Good. Okay, welcome. One, in particular, welcome to Gamu and Mandicona and Eva. Now we're already here with Agostina. And we are going to wait a few minutes more before we start the webinar. And let's see. Also joined us. Well.
People are connecting.
Don't see the mic. Well, Abidjan. Hi. Four new participants that joined us. Kamba from Abidjan, Gamu from Harare, Mandela from Pretoria, Yama from Pretoria. Let us finish and then we start. Okay, 5.
I disconnected. I'm connected again under
What do you mean? The PPT.
because I told her to press to share file.
What can you do?
Just 50. You have the
Okay, so and I can see that this is work now. I can start, it's 10:30. We have 4 participants plus the facilitators. Also have someone else just joined. Please. Come on. Ah, okay. The participate. Hear me?
Me? I guess we are having some technical problems because a lot of people are having videos. And we are turned off now. I hope Monica will be able to connect again soon. I can't hear her or see her. I wrote her. I would propose that we just wait for 2 more minutes and trying to find a solution until we can get started.
Can't hear you. Please connect again. Okay.
Yes, if you can hear you.
Possible.
Can you hear me now?
Now? Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so one can hear.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, from Victoria.
Okay, good. Fantastic. Sometimes we have a little problem with the line, might go away, generally goes back, which is good. So thanks for joining this webinar. Now, I don't know who actually was my opening, so I briefly recap. Basically saying that this is the third webinar we organized. The other ones were on SG and the first gender. The themes, the topics have been selected as a result from a very complex training analysis that was done within the partnership where there is Curie, the ATCO, HR, and PADER. And the webinar, which is the second one of today, because we already did one with for Asia, Central Asia, and Arab states. So this one is for Africa, and it's going to be around the 3 major questions. So we have facilitators for each of the questions. The first one will be answered by Erline, and the question is, what domestic funding? Can you introduce us to domestic funding, Erline? I give you the mic and the privilege of being presenter, so you can share your screen. Okay, Erline? Erline, okay. Erline, the presenter. Good. Erline. What's happening? Erline.
Yes.
Yes, you now have the privilege as a presenter, so you can start. I've already posted the question, which is, can you do domestic funding? What is domestic funding in few messages? Please, the floor is yours.
Is the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start again. So my name is Erline Wups. I work for PARDEF, and I'm based at headquarters, where I deal with domestic funding as well as a number of other donors. As you know, to be able to support the 2030 agenda, we need to make sure that the ILO is well resourced. As you can tell from the graph on the screen, the ILO's current resource base is unbalanced and relies heavily on traditional multi-buy donors. That's a problem because the funding environment is increasingly competitive, while traditional donors are reducing ODA and restricting aid to a more select number of countries. Towards funding, to diversify the funding base and pay special attention to member states that have the means to contribute, but so far have not, as well as those that have the potential to contribute more. This scenario, whereby the government of a developing country pays the ILO from its own budget to carry out a project own country, that's what we call domestic funding. Domestic funding can be seen as a step towards self-reliance by the governments. And when governments provide their own resources to the ILO, it also shows a very clear commitment on their part. In the ILO, domestic funding is most commonly used in upper middle income countries, and in particular in South Africa and Latin America. One of the research documents for this webinar is the list of ODA eligible countries. And it's a very useful list because it tells you which countries fall under which income category. Keep in mind that while upper middle income countries may have the biggest potential resource mobilization, certainly does not exclude the least developed countries. Least countries often receive substantial budget support from, for example, regional banks, which in turn may be allocated to the ILO. Domestic funding fluctuates tremendously from year to year. As you can see from the table, domestic funding peaked in 2008 and 2014, with annual approvals over $60 million. On average, domestic funding accounts for 4.1% of total approvals, and where we are lagging behind the rest of the UN. Overall, in the UN, domestic funding counts for about 6% of approvals. The ILO's goal is that by 2017, domestic funding increases to almost 5%. Shows that approvals are mostly allocated to employment issues, but we also have a very high number of agreements related to social protection. Proactive engagements from field officers to build with member states to make the case for domestic funding. Our partners go far beyond the Ministries of Labour. The ILO receives direct support from various ministries, such as Ministries of Planning, Commerce, Finance, Economic Affairs, and also Ministries of Public Works. In Latin America, and also in South Africa, we have examples of domestic funding from provincial governments. Indirect domestic funding refers to the situation where a portion of a foreign grant or loan, for example, from an international financial institute, is transferred to the ILO via the National Treasury. In this context, the ILO recently signed an agreement with the government of DRC, which was in fact a portion of funds that the government had received from the Africa Development Bank. This is an example of an innovative source of funding. In law, labor prosecutors and judges inflict penalties on violations of labor law, and that can go to millions of dollars. The proceeds from these fines don't go back to the Treasury, but they are assigned to actions to remedy the cause of the crime. Part of the receipts of these fines are now allocated to the ILO for remedial action. Tapping into domestic resources requires a very proactive approach. Start by making an analysis of the potential for direct or indirect domestic funding. Find out under which ODA category a country falls. Analyze the source of funds that the country receives and how these funds are dispersed. Find out to what extent other UN agencies receive domestic funding, for which policy areas. Are key donors about to give loans or grants? What are the plans of the EC, the World Bank, and the Regional Bank for your country? And are there any UN funds or other global funds that the government is eligible for? This type of information is crucial to have. You can get it on the internet and through interviews with key informants. It is equally important to build the trust of the government. Government that is convinced of the technical expertise and the competitive advantages of the ILO, and that has seen examples of results and impact of ILO's work, is more likely to entrust the ILO with its own resources. Like other development partners, governments expect an evidence-based approach. A relationship with the government is really a prerequisite to, building, mobilizing funds. Discussions around the development or the renewal of the Decent Work Country Program form an entry point for exploring how governments could contribute to the realization of their own decent work outcomes. Again, there is not always a need for the ILO to provide direct support. Cost-sharing arrangements, whereby the ILO delivers technical expertise while the government funds the activities, may be an attractive way of working. Thank you. That's the first part of the presentation.
Thanks a lot. So just for the participants to know, Aline Book is based in Geneva. She's in Pardev. I have question for Arlene. Anything that is not clear or anything you would like her to explain further? Please make sure your mic is not red before you speak. Thanks. Briefly introduce yourself before speaking. Thanks a lot.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. This is. Can you tell your name because
Yes,
I just see
hi.
a number.
Exactly. Sorry for that. I'm Christy from Cairo.
Hi, Christine. Nice to see you online then.
So thanks, first of all, for this great opportunity. Aline, just a quick question. What's the range of funding for the past domestic agreements we have? I mean, are we talking a very small amount as well, or does it our usual, let's say, 500,000 to several million projects?
Hi, good question, Christine. In fact, there is a lot of variety in the amounts of funding. We have a high number of fairly modest projects with funding around $100,000 or even below that. But we also have very big projects. For example, we recently signed an agreement with DRC for $5 million. We are about to sign an agreement with the government of Colombia for $3 million. And then, of course, there is the ongoing project in South Africa with the Ministry of Public Works that has gone over $15 million. So that's the range.
Okay. Any other question? Who is in Kambali? No? No, you know. Anna just joined. Welcome to this. You are based in Pretoria, or where are you based?
I'm based in Geneva.
In Geneva, okay, but you're going to be withdrawn in the next question. Thanks for coming. Anna, do you have anything to add to what Aline just told us?
Sorry, can you repeat more loudly?
Because Aline just introduced us to domestic funding, so she led us throughout this presentation where she explained us what it is and basically how it works. So now I'm asking the participants if they have questions, and also I'm asking you if you have anything to add to what I said.
Reason why Arlene invited me to join this webinar is probably because we're one of the units that has had the longest experience with direct trust funds in the ILO. And I think many of the points that she presented are relevant. But in the case of actuarial valuations, which are really specialized technical expertise, it's very relevant. What she said about the trust. The trust is, the ILO has a very strong track record in the field of actuarial valuation, which means costing how much percentage of wages workers have to contribute for health insurance, for pensions, for work injury insurance, and so forth. And the private consultants will have the legitimacy of the ILO, not only in terms of our quality of expertise, but also the fact that we are seen as neutral and fair between employers and workers when we give our advice, which has very important financial implications for workers and employers in the countries and the government, obviously, because they manage. So having a very long track record is important, because they know that ILO is better positioned than private consultants in doing this. Often they will go to private consultants, but nearly always they come back to the ILO to ask for our services. What is difficult to manage is we're talking about small projects in terms of money, but high impact. And the fact that our projects are often by very timelines in the government. For example, they have to submit a reform of the pension system by a certain date in Parliament. So we're very strictly limited in our planning of work. So we need to use external consultants as well as our ILO sort of know-how on the specific technical expertise. And the relationship with the government in those cases is extremely important between the actuaries and so that's why often it's a bit complicated when there's no actuary in the field office or in the country office to do this, which is a majority of the cases. Then we normally insist that it's centrally managed because the government really wants to have direct access to the actuaries, and also that when they have specific requests that are somehow outside of the boundaries of the direct trust funds, they know we're not letting them down. So it's really part of the ILO constituents-driven services framework. So so that's pretty much what I would add to Arlene's experience. And the blending of the ILO in that sense needs to be highly sort of fashionalized and tailored to understanding their needs. So having too many layers of intervention is sometimes important that the front person talking to them is a social security or a financial expert talking to them, so they feel we understand their concerns and we're going to exactly respond to their concerns. And the country office director is always very important.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. Are there any questions from the participants for Anna? No? I would go ahead with the second question, which is actually for Johnny and you. Johnny's not around. I don't see him in the list. He was... Pierre is telling me that he's trying to connect. So... Okay. Doesn't matter. I try to catch up with Johnny. Would you like to start answering to the second question, Anna, which is basically if you can tell us more about your experience in mobilizing domestic funding in different countries?
In fact, we are very, I would say, passive. We have such a high demand, the little capacities we have, that we are not so much active in terms of seeking more projects. The issues we face are that there are also very limited of capable experts in the field. So we probably have the majority of them working with us. So we have a capacity constraint. We go to for example, the ISA, the International Social Security Association meetings, and these are important meetings to bolster what ILO is capable of. Also, regional meetings in our area, there's Social Security Association like ECAFA in Eastern Africa, African community, CIPRES and others, where their members are basically the institutions to whom we our services. But we're always very careful with them to say, look, ILO is at your service. The social security institutions are not necessarily the ones coming to the governing body or to the ISC. So we have to insist that we are their service and not at the service of private consultancies or private pension plans. And that with our limitations in capacities, they have to pay for our tailored services to them. So we describe what we can do for them. Very important is the capacity building, because every time we do evaluation as part of a direct trust fund, we offer training. We don't train them on doing what we're doing unless they have somebody qualified to do it on board, but we establish a relationship with their staff, so we be very close to their staff to offer a plan of development them to serve their policymakers or their director generals in facing the questions they face. And also over time we have set up training programs with universities like Maastricht University that has social protection financing master, the University of Lausanne on actuarial science. There was in Africa the University of Mauritius with whom we established a program for training practitioners from the region. So these interactions with local universities are important. In terms, of course, Charles Crevier is extremely important also in bringing the credibility. So they very much like this sort of hand-holding that we have as a side product to the direct trust fund.
Thank you for this quite exhaustive and clear picture. I want to hear from the participants, thinking about your own situation, your country situation, the context that you work within at the national but also the regional level. You have a request for Anne in terms of further explaining what kind of support, for example, you can receive when negotiating domestic funding. And for 8 seconds. Good. Okay. Yeah, we don't see her. Apart from Bana, you want to participate from Antananarivo? Yes, sir. We cannot hear you. Again? It's like working, it's very far away. Maybe you write your question. Yeah. Just 1 second. Correct the question. Okay, also see that Johnny joined, but he cannot hear us. Yeah. Can you write your question? In fact, we cannot hear you. Okay, wait for Lombana to write the question. I just want to welcome Johnny. Johnny, did you hear us now? With the question of Lombana, basically Lombana is asking how can the ILO participate in tenders and competing with private firms? This is for you, Anna.
Sorry?
Basically, Nombana from Antananarivo. She's asking in the chat, she's asking a question which is how far can the ILO participate in tenders and competing with private firms?
Yeah, that's a very good question because we have this recurrently coming up. And ILO, we're sitting on two chairs for that because on the one hand, we're not supposed to use our regular budget resources to be bidding and as a consultancy firm. And on the other hand, we are promoting good governance and, anti-corruption and craft measures. So it's a good thing that they have these bidding processes in place. So how we respond to these is we normally say, look, we're not in so much time in meeting exactly all your criteria. And in the end, anyway, ILO has its obligations in terms of letters of agreement and project proposals. So we usually send a letter along with the proposal for our letter of agreement and project document. And we say in the letter, we respect your process for tendering and so forth. Here's what the ILO can offer. We are mindful that it does not exactly follow the process that you have put in place. We think it's a good process, but please understand that the ILO is a non-profit UN agency bound by its own rules, and we have a very strong track record, and we have sort of our sales pitch. If it's a country with whom we've not worked before, if we have worked with them before, we do say, as you know, we've done X number of projects with in the past, and therefore, feel free to contact us back if you find our submission of interest to you. And I would say 9 times out of 10, they come back to us.
Thanks, Anne. Actually, I was waiting for a question of Nubana, but actually this one was asked by Kambale from a and I have the one from Nubana, from Antananarivo, and what she's asking is domestic funding is only with government or does also include the funding for private sector and other donors based in the country? So basically, does it come only from the government or also from other donors?
Let me take on this question. Domestic funding is always funding that comes from the government. So it's the government who pays the ILO for implementing a project in its own country. So we'll sign an agreement with the government.
I may add an additional point. Sometimes you have government agencies that are not the government. They are semi-independent. They have a board of like Social Security institutions. Frequently, they are like corporations. Some countries they call them corporations. And then we have to ask Pardev and Jur for their clearance so that these institutions are replacing the government in the letter of agreement. Eileen, you have more on that.
Okay. I guess that the microphone of Johnny works now. But before we move ahead with Dean, just another question from Kambale, from Anna. In that context, can ILO receive money in local currency? And what did you say? Can we, as ILO, accept local currency?
This can come up.
I think this is more for, sorry, I'm just jumping now. This is, I think, more a question for finance. And we will be covering it in your third question that will be answered. So if Kambale can wait for a few minutes, then we will come back to that.
Good point. Thanks, Sister. So then let's see Johnny. Welcome, Johnny. You here now?
Yes, I hear you and see you very well now. Thank you very much.
Good.
Can
We
you
want
hear
to
me?
hear you very well. We were discussing together with Anne about the experiences. Would you, first of all, would you introduce yourself and then share with us your experiences in mobilizing domestic funding? What are your major experiences? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Hello, colleagues, most of whom are very familiar to me. Hello, and hello again to Agustina and Sietsi. Sorry for the connection problems we had, but they are sorted now. So we have managed since 2005 to have a project funded by the South African government, an expanded public works program. And that project actually right now it runs up to 20. And roughly in this current is about 8 million. And I think cumulatively it has been, I think, somewhere, I can be corrected by Sietsi, but I think somewhere between 20 and 25 million. And this is largely focused on technical assistance to the South African government for the expanded public works program. It is therefore not, the budget is not for activities, it's technical assistance. We currently have a team of 6 international experts, 2 based at headquarters and the other 4 based in provinces. And the funding is both by the national department, the national ministry at the national level, but also by the provincial ministry. And it is largely to assist in the design of the expanded public works program and also to give good practice in its execution. So the team, particularly ones in the provinces, are working there with the practitioners at the provincial and district levels and bring, let's say, good practices on how to ensure that the employment impact of public works programs is highlighted. So the teams work a lot on tool development and introducing tools to the national authorities, staff members, who then the programs under the supervision of the IO technical experts. The funds are transferred from South Africa to Geneva and then held back to us. And this amendment is a bit problematic for the national authorities, but so far they've been willing to comply. It's based in dollars, so we receive the budget is in dollars, and transfers are denominated in dollars rather than in the South African currency, the rand. We also have another window of funding from the provinces for a project on SMEs in the tourism sector and the tourism lodges. This is the program, the ILO called SCORE, for improved competitiveness through responsible enterprises. And the provinces are funding the upscaling of activities in an existing funded by the government of Flanders. So case, unlike the first case where it's fully government funded, here the funders pay the staff costs and the project and the provincial authorities are paying for the upscaling of the activities with that project. We're beginning a round of discussion because that project is going to expire in 2016. So we're beginning a round of discussion with the national authorities to see how best to handle this. We have 2 cases. One project, technical assistance, staff costs denominated in dollars. Then we have another upscaling of activities in an existing project funded by donor Flanders. So these are 2 different experiences and 2 different approaches. We have also received money from the National Treasury for the development is on the support from SMEs, and also been a small window of funding. But because it's National Treasury, we were particularly interested in it with view to hopefully upscaling that relationship. A third context was that in 3 years ago, we did get an allocation of $10 million, but we couldn't quite sign the agreement because there were differences, and I think Sietsi will comment that the conditions. And one of the key ones was already asked on local currency, which was a single audit principle. The other was the movement of the funds from South Africa to Geneva and then back to South Africa. But we've gotten all these difficulties now, and the two windows funding from the provinces and one from National Treasury have now been in a manner that is acceptable to both us and the authorities. We also have funding from Namibia, social protection flow assessment, the Namibian authorities, and that was so sent to the ILO in dollars for funding the ILO to execute the assessment. So these are the experiences we have. But if you ask me what are the key success indicators for this, one is close proximity to the national authorities, a strong relationship of trust with the national authorities, and this is built by prior engagement. I think it's rare that you will find authorities putting money just as at the beginning. So normally it seems to come after you've done some initial project work with bilateral donors. The authorities see the impact, they appreciate the effectiveness of the ILO, then they'll be willing to put their own funds to conduct the activities and to upscale the activities. So the evidence of the performance of the ILO is key. The relationship with the national authorities to make you are closely embedded with the authorities is quite key. So it's key that all the colleagues that we have funded the national authorities are actually embedded in the ministries of the national authorities. They are based in the national authorities themselves. I think let me stop here, but that is our experience in South Africa.
Thanks, John. Check. Let me participants if have if questions or requests for more explanation. Just remember that if you want Gamma, I see Gamma wants to talk. Gare? No. Pretoria.
Oh, yeah, so why am I talking? He's the man. Over to you, Gamma.
I hope everyone can hear me clearly. I just to add to what Johnny has been saying. Just to confirm, can everyone hear me there? At least the host.
Sorry?
You can.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I just want to emphasize what Johnny mentioned is the fact that we have built a good relationship with the government over the years. Therefore, our problem at this moment is not the raising of the funds per se. Is the non-financial issues that are probably going to give us a problem going forward. As the ILO carries out its reforms, the rules and regulations they make, they are designed for somebody sitting in an ILO office, especially sitting in Geneva. Okay, some of the rules work for someone sitting in an ILO office in the field. And those of us who work embedded in government, it is a challenge. Let me give you an example. For instance, if I want anything from partners in government, because I'm working sitting with them, I talk to them, or I just stand up and walk to their office. I have to set an appointment like colleagues sitting in an ILO office. However, when it comes to planning, because they know my schedule, I plan with them because I'm sitting with them. So say maybe we're planning to go and meet with a mayor in a different province. And that mayor says to us, okay, can see you next week. And then my colleagues, I say, sorry, I can't go with you next week because my ILO regulations say that I need to have 14 days notice before I travel. If you consider the DS security clearances, effectively it becomes more than 21 days. So I'm sitting with them, we're planning to travel and meet this mayor. And I say, sorry, I can't go next week when the mayor can see us because you need to have told me 21 days ago. So going forward, I see this as a problem, because what will happen is all things which ILO cannot deliver in 21 days, for example, they will have to find consultants to do the work. So 2019, when we want to extend this relationship, they may look, you guys, your working conditions are difficult. We can't operate with someone who needs 21 days before they can travel with us. So in a nutshell, I'm giving you an example. There are a lot of other examples I can give, which is such as technical cooperation or development cooperation in South Africa. We're preparing a document which is sent through Johnny, obviously, to inform the broader law in terms of how these things could be improved, so that we don't lose the capital that the goodwill that we've invested in over the years. It's of things that organization fails to realize, that the sitting working with the donor directly is different from somebody sitting in an ILO office who can say, forget it, I'll come and see you in 6 months or 3 months. So we've got peculiar conditions which make it difficult going forward to be able to continue this relationship. So maybe let me stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this contribution. Anyone like to comment on this?
To say that we're looking forward to receiving the list of proposals for improvements. I mean, that will be very useful for the ILO in general.
Okay, thanks, Arlene. I think we can go ahead with the finance issue. Actually, something related to this was already raised. We have Agustin and Sita from Geneva, from both the CT, from finance. Sita, I wanted to ask you, what are the recurring issues that you can identify when negotiating an agreement for domestic funding?
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everybody. So, when we talk about domestic funding, we have to sign an agreement like we do for any other project that we do in the ILO. And for that, both PARDEF, Finance, and JUR came up with a standard funding, domestic funding agreement. This agreement covers all the conditions required to protect the ILO. And some of those conditions, let me say different. Many times we receive agreements that standard and not include clauses that have to protect the ILO. So I hear a lot people come in the field, you know, we need this money, it is important, and I fully agree with them. At the end of the day, we have to protect the ILO, financially and legally. And then have those standard agreements with standard clauses. Now, what we've seen is if we move away from standard agreements, what are common clauses that are being reached? Now, the first, and I just do it in random order, okay? The first one is pre-financing. We mean that some of the agreements actually have a clause where the ILO only gets paid based on the actuals, so based on the expenditures. This one, the ILO has no funding itself to pre-finance. Our rules and regulations are very clear, we cannot pre-finance. So therefore, these kind of clauses, payment schedules that are not in line with the budget, can unfortunately not be accepted. That is something that is recurring very, very frequently. What we have is that, and that is not only for domestic funding, but for other agreements as well, is the program support cost. Support cost for the ILO is a standard rate of 13%. It's for tax. So there have been rumors going around that for domestic funding, there is a special rate. There is no special rate for domestic funding. the state is 30%. In the case that this is absolutely not possible, you have to submit a waiver request to the Treasurer and Financial Controller through the BaFin. And that we have been rejecting many. So the standard rate is 13%. And it's important because all our traditional donors also pay 13, and there is one that pays 23%. So it is important that we don't give full treatment to some of the other donors. Another, and I think it came up already in some of the other presenters and questions raised, is the single order principle. ILO has, like all other UN agencies, no exceptions, we follow single order principle. Single principle means the ILO can only be audited by internal auditors or by the external auditors being audited by the governing body. So two auditors who can audit the ILO accounts. This doesn't mean a project cannot be audited by request of the donor. There's a request to the ILO Financial Controller, and we request our external auditors to perform the audit. We will set up a terms of reference that can request one the auditors to focus on. So it's all possible, but it can only be done by our external auditors. Everyone has to pay for it. So it is not something the ILO will pay for. Which is crucial but important is financial statements. They have to be standard to the ILO. If we have different statements, type of periods covered, it's becoming impossible for the ILO to manage because we have, probably 150 different donors. So the ILO tries to enforce our standard financial statements. We have two agreements that came to us where the project, the agreement has to be implemented and administered by the rules and regulation of the donor. This is possible. We can only adhere to our own financial, not only financial, all staff rules. So we can only administer the contribution in accordance with the ILO regulation, rules, directives, and procedures. We can adhere to the donor rules. So again, that is really, really important, and we have seen it also on there is a disagreement between the donor and the ILO. It is going to be the local law that will apply. We cannot apply with the local law. Okay, we are an international organization. We have contributions coming up, and if this is something that is really required, and you will be able to manage. It is very difficult. We have seen in the past, it is very difficult to manage ILO in-kind contributions. Okay, we have contributions that go up half of the budget. Half of the budget is paid by the donor. The other half of the budget is paid by the ILO. Like I said, ILO doesn't have money. We don't have our own money. We have the donor money. Therefore, when we talk about in-kind contributions, we often use other donor funding as ILO contribution. And that is really important. We will not accept our contributions from projects unless the donor provides these funds to those other projects, give their written approval. It's not email, it's not a telephone call. We want to see written approval that this donor has no objections and understands all the consequences. Because the project is audited, it is their project that gets audited as well. And many donors don't want that. If they want to control the audit, it should not be controlled by another donor. If there is contribution, you need everything. Even as the ILO does not need to report on it, were audited, the auditors will look at it, and the auditors will say, but you, as ILO, agreed to have ILO income contribution of $250,000, proof to us, and done by documentation. The staff cost is to be clearly documented. How much time did the person spend on it, and what did the person spend on? So you have to keep time sheets. Now, concerns we have, and I think that has been raised now many times, so this is going to be a difficult one. Bridging fund. So we can sign an agreement based on any currency. So South African rands, we can sign in Colombian pesos, we can sign in Indonesian rupiahs, it doesn't matter. The funds need to be channeled to GIVA. And I know it seems to be becoming more and more of an issue. It seems more with certain countries than with others. The reason why this is required is, and I think we have one colleague from Cairo, and I was informed by a colleague here, is that their currency draft to the dollar. What this means is, if I had in my account an equivalent of $1 million yesterday, I've got only even $1,000 left today. The ILO cannot cover. So, and the ILO does understand many of the actions will take place in the same currency. So we receive money in South Africa, we receive South African rand, and we'll be spending money in South African rand. The point is, we need to protect the ILO, because exchange rate losses like this are very high, and here they were very, very big. So even with the ILO not being willing to receive money locally, and very small, we lose a lot of money because of exchange rate, and that needs to be minimized. Again, as I said, is the ILO has no pot of money where we can cover this. And even if there is no other possible way, you need an approval authority from the Treasury Department that you can receive money locally, and you're done up front. And I can stretch it enough. It needs to be done before committing anything to the donor. In certain cases, Treasury has rejected it, and into a situation that money arrives, but we can't use it. We have to send it back. So if it isn't, if we cannot go around it, then it needs to be approved by the Treasury Department. Now, you come back to Johnny, and I don't want to go into it too far. I think when we discuss these things with donors, as we have done with South Africa, I think when we left at the time, they clearly understood. It is so the donor who doesn't want the exchange risk, and I understand that. Okay, for them, moving money between two countries, there's an exchange rate issue. The Poland, we believe that is lower than the risk that we have when we receive the money locally. So the moment the ILO has done that, we don't receive money locally, definitely not in the huge amounts. And you mentioned the contribution of 25. It is currently already 27 million. The domestic funding, and I'm talking just now one agreement with South Africa. I mean, with many agreements. So on the National Department of Works, it's currently over $27 million US. I've got all the main points that I wanted to cover. The only thing what I would like to say is, again, if we stick to the standard funding agreements, these agreements can be cleared in question of half an hour. Okay, it might arrive, we have to put in our workflow, but they can be cleared very, very quickly. As soon as we move away from standard agreements, it's going to be longer, there will be longer discussions, it's huge to be involved, In some cases, audit needs to be involved. Finance always needs to be involved. We move away from standard agreements. I cannot stretch enough. Share documents with us as early on as possible. We can help you, and we get last-minute deadlines. So this is it for us for the moment. So if anyone has questions, please, we can answer them.
Thank you. Very clear, very much appreciated. Any from the participants need more explanation on this? Question.
I have a question.
Please.
Yes, thank you very much for clarifying those issues. It's good to always get them reclarified. I want two issues where I would like to request perhaps your consideration. One is the fact that was just mentioned of exchange rate, or rather devaluation of the local currency. We did that recently ourselves in South Africa, where the South African rand has been very stable over the years. But just 2 years or so, it has become volatile, dropping from what we signed the agreement from say, a rate of 1 to 10, currently hovering between 13 and 15. It is. But what that means is that the long-term plans, because we're in a long-term relationship with the government, so they put batch lines all the way going to 2019 using what was the prevailing exchange rate. And when the exchange rate shifted, it is now they have to find money from other projects which are underspending and channel that money to the ILO. But what that does is, it happened recently was at some point we ended up dipping negatively and the project got suspended, which I have no problem with because those are the ILO rules. But the challenge, of course, becomes you are sitting with these people and then you just tell them, guys, from now on I'm not working. And should I go and sit home or should I just sit in the office with them? And then they pay maybe 2 weeks later, things are back to normal. So the only issue I want to raise here is we are working with our partners, are talking to them. They are not refusing to pay. They are simply reallocating funds so that they make these funds available. And the second issue I just want to share is with financial statements. Our government partner has different financial year to the ILO. From March, and the agreement states that they get status as at end of March and as at end of September, which is out of alignment with ILO's own calendar or final year. Often we struggle to get these financial statements on time because they will be trying to close their accounts and is always delaying them. And by the time we get these accounts, we'll have written so many emails and they're so frustrated and that I is getting them into trouble with their own auditors because if they can't close their accounts, they get an audit qualification. So in the past 2 years, we've had this problem where they get these audit qualifications because of the ILO. So I'm just pleading with our colleagues in Geneva to recognize that yes, we are out of alignment with the ILO financial year, but respect what we signed up to with the donor to provide this statement as at end of March and end of September. Thank you.
So let me start with your last question. Absolutely. If we have an agreement with the donor to a financial statement by a certain date, we should do these dates. I fully agree with you. Actually, it is Augustina who is dealing with them and is telling me now that we issue about 3-4 statements per year. Now, I admit the ILO financial year is from January till December. Statements that go from 1st of April to the 31st of March is more complicated. If there is alignment, we have to look a way around it. But Ingrid?
So far, we've always been issuing them at the end of the year, and then, with this case in particular, with the Public Works program, given we're off need of additional funding, let's say, then we've been sending them more often than necessary. Like I can recall that this last time we had sent them at the end of August and then again at the end of September. So it might not be following what has been agreed in the agreement, but then again, what was agreed is that there is no pre-financing. So that's why sometimes we do not respect the financial state schedule in order to send more reminders, let's say.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, what we're having in the past, we would just get automated statements end of December, which don't help them, because if you give them a statement as at the end of December 31, they say, we are not going to use it. We want the one that talks to our own financial year, which is simply end of March and end of September. That's what they need. But obviously, if it is for purposes of following up on payment and you issued ad hocly, that is fine. That's not a problem. But I hope going forward it won't be an issue. Thank you very much.
So I can confirm we will issue a financial statement as of the end of March. It's a problem, huh? So you can do that. We will just issue one as of the end of March. You will get a total expenditure. It's no problem. As of the end of September. Now, to the other question about exchange rate, signed in dollars, and due to the local currency is with the donor. Because dollars, we expect the amount in dollars. This is actually the case with South Africa. The agreement with South Africa was signed in dollars. So there's no exchange rate risk for the ILO. We know exactly how many dollars we will get. So the plan will basically remain the same. Agreements, and I just mentioned one now, Colombia. Colombia in pesos, we sign in local currency. So we know we get a local currency. If their evaluates against the dollar, these less dollars, and therefore we can spend less. And the exchange rate risk is with the ILO. Now, the way we minimize that, or not minimize it, we offset it, is by reducing the budget. Because a budget of an initial agreement if we don't get the same equivalent in dollars. I think what is happening, and I think this is something that I think we should take off. Joni is going to be here next week, and I'll have a meeting with him. So I'm going to go too much into the current question with South Africa, but I think there are more underlying problems that we have about basically the ILO that is pre-financing. So as I said, the ILO should not be pre-financing, and you already mentioned it yourself. There has been a time that we had suspended the project, or at least we said we would, because the ILO needs the money in advance.
Okay. Thanks. Before we go ahead with the conclusion, just for you to know that there was a question in the chat. A few people asked for the standard agreement, like Novana from Antananarivo, and then Tapera from Lusaka, and also from Abidjan. We had the same request. So those documents, the standard agreement with those and formative funding, both available on internet. But in any case, Erlene has already shared the link in our chat. So you access the standard templates for agreement, accessing that link in the 3 language versions. Thank you very much, Erlene, for that. We still have 5 minutes, so I would like to call in Erlene for final words. Would be the major messages you would like to recap, and what is let's say, the advice you would give to colleagues in relation to domestic funding?
Thank you for that. My key message is to be proactive and to really focus on building that relationship of trust with the government, so that they get the confidence to work with ILO in the future. Other than that, whenever you're starting a dialogue and it's likely that there is going to be an agreement on domestic funding, contact us as soon as possible for the appraisal of the project proposal, as well as to start the clearance project of the process agreements. The earlier we start, the easier it will be to deal with any obstacles that may occur.
Okay, Arlene. Any other thing that Johnny or Sitz and Agustina or Anne would like to add?
Yes, Johnny, from my side, I think I have to distinguish between the teams and modalities that often are a challenge with a real, let's say, strategic issue of building these partnerships and demonstrating our value add to the national authorities and relationships to the point that they feel it worthwhile to invest in ILO for them to deliver on the national mandate. That's the strategic view we must always maintain. I think the Sietzi, Agustina, Kalin, they are there to help us to comply with the rules, but not make the rule focus. And we have seen in South Africa that when relationship is good, the very same conditions that they may find unpalatable, it may be a euphemism for how much not fully convinced. But with the same rules, they can then turn around and still make the money available. And that is where the focus should be. Thank you.
Thank you. In relation to that, maybe a question for Dev. Is there a repository or a collection of cases that the national authorities can access, cases from other countries, so that countries can see what happened in terms of partnership on domestic funding in other countries, accessible to entities, so not just to the ILO? Is there anything like this that colleagues can use with their negotiation?
We do have on mobilizing domestic resources, and that fact sheet contains a number of examples from Colombia, South Africa, Bangladesh, and also social protection. It's currently available in English, and in the coming 2 weeks it will also become available in French and in Spanish.
Okay, thank you very much, Lina. I'm putting the link now in the chat. So, So use the material from this link with the other materials that were mentioned within this or used within this webinar. Do you have anything to add, or is there any other thing participants want to say? No?
When we do the survey, we will send them a mail to have feedback on the webinar.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Barry. He's reminding me that there will be a survey after this webinar, so you will receive a link so that you can also very few questions, so it's not going to take long, but you will give us feedback on the webinar as well. Let me see. I see that there is another contribution in the chat. First question from Kambale. These huge constituents are also in need of capacity building in LRM. Kambale, would you like to add anything on this? We just take comments otherwise. Okay. Good.
This is Sietse from Budgetering. And there's just one last comment I would like to make about sharing of documents. So absolutely, the documents that are publicly available by the ILO, no problem. Do not be sharing any other documents from other donors. If there's any doubt, please clear it with PARDEF, and PARDEF will contact you or Budgetee. We have confidentiality. There are certain documents we cannot share between donors unless we get their written approval. So I just want to say that what is publicly available, you can share publicly. otherwise check with finance part of Azure.
Good. Thanks, Victor, for reminding us to this. And then also thank you for your contribution and for the contribution of everyone. It was all very clear and instructional, very useful. Thank you very much. And so thanks to all the colleagues for participating. I see the facilitator later on in the day for the seminar with the Americas at 4 o'clock Italian time. And I say goodbye to all participants. Thank you much. Thank you.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's the
And the next